Alrighty guys, so today what we're going to go over is how to attach different types of pinch pots in order to begin your pinch pot kiln god sculpture. So I'm going to show you two different ways because depending on what you want to make, it's going to depend on what type of shape your pinch pots are. So I know we went over how to do pinch pots a few days ago, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you how to make it maybe a little bit closer up, especially if you struggled with the first one. So you're going to start with a ball of clay and you're just going to stick your thumb in the middle of it, usually about 3/4 of the way down. You want to make sure you're keeping it in your palm, not on the table, because then you're going to get a flat bottom right away and we don't know necessarily where we want to put our bottom yet. So I'm just going to go through and I'm pinching this out using all of my fingers along the edge as to not get too many fingerprints in there. And just kind of starting to open it up so that we have a hollow space. With clay, you don't want to have anything that's too thick because then you risk getting an air bubble in it and then having your project maybe explode or crack or some of the other various mishaps that can happen in the kiln. So you do want to leave a fairly thick part around the edge here so that we could go ahead and attach them a little bit easier. I'm going to just kind of rest that loosely on the side, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing to my other pinch pot. Now this is just creating a hollow surface for you, or a hollow shape rather. Alright, so you're going to want to go in, you're going to want to try to smooth out any of those cracks. I don't want to waste too much of your time by, spending a half hour smoothing out cracks, so I'm just going to kind of give you the basic technique for now. So you're going to have your two pinch pots, and you want to make sure that they line up, fairly accurately. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you don't want one that's really small and then another one that's really large. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to take some of your tools, either a pin tool or one of these little bit sharper X-Acto type tools, and you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to make your score marks. So we talked about these, and what this does is it's going to prevent your clay from separating. Now you don't always have to do this depending on how well you're smoothing it in, but for your first few projects I'm going to have you guys go ahead and work with the slip. And then you'll be able to tell as we go on in the course when you need it and when you don't need to use it. But this is just going to help kind of glue and cement your project together a little bit better. So now if you could see, we have these little hatch marks in our clay, so our score marks. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to take my slip. Now you could use your finger. I prefer to use a tool because then I feel like I'm able to smooth a little bit better. And you're just going to add it to one side. And you don't want to put too much on because then it's going to get hard to smooth together. So just a little bit you need, not too much of this. It'll work pretty well. So you should have one side that looks something like that. Alright, after we're done doing that, we're going to go ahead and we are going to stick together the two pinch pots. So I'll have something like that. Now, these are not connected. It kind of looks like two half rocks stuck together. We're going to need to blend these together. So in order to blend them together, we're going to roll out something called a coil. So a coil is that snake-like piece of clay, and we're going to be making coil pots for our next project in class. This doesn't have to be a perfect coil, just something to kind of fill in. But what you're doing is you're kind of squeezing it between your hands to create almost a cylindrical-like shape. And then what you're going to do is you're going to roll from your fingertips all the way to the palm, edge of the palm of your hand. And it's kind of like making a pretzel or something like that, starting in the center and working your way out. Like I said, don't be afraid if it's not a perfect coil. We're going to go into this more in depth later on in the class. Just make sure it's going to be long enough to go around the edges of your pinch pots. So what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to take my coil and I am going to wrap it around my two pinch pots, kind of cut it off on a diagonal. Same thing goes for the other side. So now I have a little space-like planet. What you're going to want to do to connect these is just smooth. So I'm smoothing it in from one direction, and then I'm smoothing it into the other way. So you're going to continue to do this until your pinch pots are connected. Now once you have your pinch pots connected, you could go in with tools, with your hands, with one of those palettes, and then start to adjust the shape. So this is if you're starting out with something that has more of a circular shape. What it's going to allow you to do is have a nice hollow space to sculpt off of. And so if you find that the piece you're going to be making is going to be a little bit more rounded, this is going to be the technique for you to follow. And you're just going to keep smoothing it in until you have something that looks like a potato. So if you have something that looks like a potato, you're doing it right. The next technique is taking more of these cylindrical forms, and if you want to make something and that's thin or a little bit longer, say a fish or something, and I'm going to show you actually with my little chameleon sculpture, go figure, I wonder where that came from, that I started earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to create pinch pots, but these are going to be almost in a boat type shape. So I'm going to go in and just kind of start digging in with my finger, and then you can kind of pinch it around the edges, just kind of creating a hollowed out form for yourself. It might even work if you just take your fingers and kind of smooth and dig out and elongate that form. So it kind of looks like you have a little canoe or something. Now, depending on the size of the sculpture you want to make, that's going to depend on the size of your pinch pots. And this is just to get the basic body shape down. After that, you can sculpt on all your other elements and really begin to change the shape of it. Now you could make pinch pots in any shape you want. These are probably just the two basic ones to start out with. If you have a project that requires something a little bit different, I can absolutely help you achieve that in class. This is just to show you the two that I find are most necessary when starting out this project. You're going to follow the same technique as I showed you in the other one, so I don't want to be too repetitive. You're going to score both sides, slip one side up, put them together, coil it, there you go, you have another potato shape. So I'm going to move this to the side. You could flatten this out as you go. And now I'm going to show you how you can start to attach other pieces onto your kiln gods. So I started two. One of them's kind of, I guess, like a Totoro inspired creature. And I haven't finished it quite yet. I still have to make eyes on it, nose, mouth. I started with some ears and some feet that definitely need some work. It needs arms, but this is the one I started out making using my potato-esque pinch pot. That was my rounded one. And then I have this body form, and I added a head that I started of Piccolo. And so he obviously needs a tail and legs and all that stuff. But this is one that I made with more of those elongated pinch pots. And then I squeezed up, I pinched here to kind of start to create his spikes on the top of him. So I spent maybe like an hour or so on each of these, just getting all the pieces connected, and they have probably a few more hours of work to go into them. There are two things I wanted to address with you guys, and that's why I made two different types of creatures. So if you're making an animal, animals, just like people, have joints. And if you're used to working in 2 dimensions, the first instinct is going to want to be to draw those on. Now in 3 dimensions, you're going to actually want to sculpt those. So I'm probably going to make the legs for the chameleon and the tail for the chameleon individually, and then attach those on later. But something that's really important is to start to develop joints on the body. So I know his one leg is going to start out about there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a small piece of clay. You want to make sure that you really compress it and push it against the project so that you're not going to have any air trapped between the clay. And all you're going to do is you're just going to start to go and just smooth it in. And as you smooth it in, it's going to become pretty seamless. And there you go. You're just going to kind of start to create a joint for the leg to go ahead and attach onto. So you don't necessarily need to slip and score that. You can just add on additional pieces just by simply compressing the clay into the form you already started and kind of manipulating it as you wish. I also started to begin to create the tail. He does have a pretty large base at the edge of his tail, so I just took some clay and just kind of started building that up as well until I go ahead and attach his actual tail. And I think I'm going to do that so it looks nice and spiraled, and so you'll definitely be able to tell that he is a little chameleon and not a tadpole, which he's kind of looking like in this stage right now. So that's how you begin to sculpt joints, begin to sculpt and add on things. You could pinch your form, begin to add on your head and all that stuff. I know you're all going to have different ideas, so I will help you all individually as needed. The next one is this little monster that I kind of started working on. Like I said, he needs some eyeballs, he needs some, you know, nose, mouth, things like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how you could go ahead and create another ear. Now, first instinct is to make an ear that's completely flat. You don't want to go ahead and do that. You could see that this ear is actually in 3 dimensions. It's not going straight up and down. So in order to do that, you're going to want to make a hollowed out form. So I'm just going to take a piece of clay, and you can manipulate it really any way you want. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of form it over my thumb, almost like I did a pinch pot. Now, once I form the clay over my thumb, I could kind of begin to pull it down a little bit and start to manipulate a shape. I'm going to start kind of pinching it on the top and making it pointy on the tip. So you could see I kind of have almost like a little ear forming, which is great because that's what I was going for. Alright, so I'm going to have something that looks like that, and it's also going to be hollowed out in the middle. Now if you feel like when you line it up it's a little bit too big, you can always go in and use a pin tool or an X-Acto tool and just trim a little bit of that excess off. What I'm going to do next is I'm simply going to go ahead and I'm going to attach this to my little creature. So you want to make sure that you do have a part flaring out like this. It's going to make it for a more seamless attachment. And I'm just going to kind of push it onto the head. And then all I'm going to do is smooth it in. Now by having these little pieces kind of sticking out around the edge before I attached it, it already has clay for me to smooth in, so I don't need to add any extra onto there. Now you can if you want to, or if you feel like you see a piece that needs a little bit more, but you're pretty much just going to smooth it in and go from there. Now you could see this one I started to indent a little bit, so I could go ahead and do the same thing on this side. And you want to be delicate with it. You don't want to push too hard and cave in what you're working on. So make sure that you either support it from the back or that you, you know, are very delicate with it. So I'm going to kind of continue to sculpt this little chameleon I was working on and this little monster I was working on as we go on in class. But for now, I'm going to let you kind of start your project and we'll see where we go with it. And if you need any help, I'll be around, or you can definitely go back and review this video. Alrighty, thank you.